Good morning and welcome to Day 3 of the Housing Alliance of Pennsylvania's Home Within Reach Conference. This is the Blight Affinity session, and it's all about what it takes to transform blighted properties into good housing options for low-mod households. Our organizers asked that I mention to you this afternoon that there are 2 session blocks. This afternoon, there are 2 session blocks, one from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m., and the other is from 2:15 to 3:15. And a few of those sessions you might be interested in, having come to this Blight Affinity session. They include equitable planning for inclusive growth, discussion on lead hazard reduction in multifamily and single-family housing. There's another session, working smarter using data and mapping to target blighted properties. There is also building and preserving home ownership for all of Pennsylvania, and choosing the right tools to address blight. So those are some of your afternoon offerings and possibilities for you. And then after the last session, there are moderator-led networking group discussions from 3:30 to 4:30 on various topics like blight, community development programs, low-income housing tax credits, rental assisting, health and housing, resident/tenant health and safety, eviction, people on the front line, coordinated entry, health and housing, and just general connections. There's a lot going on this afternoon. But back to this session where we are right now. This session is really about what some of us all might consider the holy grail of anti-blight work, to be able to actually create good, affordable housing for folks. So I am Irene McLaughlin-Clark, and I'm an attorney, former municipal court judge in Pittsburgh. And it has been my honor to provide legal services for the tenacious, smart, and passionate community builders, like all of you and this fabulous panel that we've pulled together. Each of them has unique experience, organizational positioning, and approach to make quality homes arise from blight. So we are going to get started, but let me just tell you, each presenter has just like 12 minutes to share their wisdom. And then our plan is to save 20 minutes for Q&A at the end. So let's go on to our speakers. We have first Judy Memberg, who is the Executive Director of Genesis Housing Corp., hailing from Montgomery County, drawing on 30 years of involvement with housing counseling, neighborhood revitalization, and affordable housing development. Okay, Judy, take it away.
Hi. So let me do this screen share. Okay, so I'm Judy Memberg from Genesis Housing. I'm the executive director, and we're a small organization that serves Montgomery County, which is in the suburbs of Philadelphia. It's a mix of townships and boroughs, and very suburban, urban, and rural. There are many very affluent communities, and there are distressed communities. So we've rehabbed or built over 500 units. So I'm going to start with a good story, which is the Willows of East Greenville, blighted property. The oldest part of the building is from pre-Civil War through about 1920 is the newest section. And we just started leasing up this month for 73 affordable apartments. East Greenville is in the western rural area, but it's an old borough. And so the township, the borough was very concerned about what was going to happen with this building when the elderly owner stopped using it. He largely stopped his business. He was only using a tiny part of the building. It's 100,000 square feet. So they were very concerned that it was going to be a fire hazard. It still took quite a bit of effort to get together all the pieces to make this type of project work. So it's some of the renovation and then the after picture of the apartments that are now leasing up. But turning blighted properties into housing, it's not easy. And it's not like HGTV where they find a property and they immediately acquire it with no problems acquiring it, rehab it in 6 or 8 weeks, or maybe even less. And then they sell it for a big profit. This is not what we're doing. So let's get real. Acquiring the blighted properties is incredibly difficult. Most municipalities do not want affordable housing. They don't want it because they say they don't want school kids. There's an element of racism in all of it. So it's usually hard to get municipal approval. And the renovations take a long time and they're often very costly. There are no quick profits. For a tax credit project, in the end, there might be some developer fee and profit, but for most projects, you can't have it work and come out with an affordable price. So that finding that right property. So if you can find the seller, the picture that I have is of after the rehab, and the yard on the bottom, the bank that owned it described it as a single family house with a 4-car garage. Sounds great. And we don't have 4-car garages in this community. So we went and looked at it, and that 4-car garage was actually an abandoned gas station, and like a 1950s gas station with 2 pumps still there and 2 underground tanks. So when we were the only ones that would take this on and spend the money to remove the tanks, clean up the soils. So this now is a lovely single family home with a large yard. With the grass is there now. This picture was taken before the grass grew in. But there often are environmental tax lien problems with properties and title issues, like who owns it when it goes to heirs, trying to find them all. So, often you can use a land bank if you have that in your community, or a blighted list, but it's often hard to get control of that property. So how do you actually fund this? And that's the other issue, is that you have a project, but if the rehab costs exceed the value, you can't get a loan to pay back. There's no float on there. There's no profit showing. You need to raise money with grants or other programs, but each program is very competitive and has its own restrictions. So if you try to apply without controlling a site, it's hard to say how much it's going to cost to rehab when you don't have it. And many programs require that you have the control. So maybe you have a line of credit for buying properties, but there are costs with the loan and costs of holding properties, paying taxes, mowing lawns, shoveling snow. So it's not a simple thing. And you're responsible for any problems with that property, keeping it secured if it's a building. So rehabbing in 6 to 8 weeks, I always laugh when I see that they come in and they never seem to have serious structural issues. They just remove a wall and open up for an open floor pan, update the bathroom and the kitchen, and they are good to go. That is not what happens. Our properties have lead paint, asbesto, and mold issues. They could have structural issues. We often work in communities that have historic preservation requirements. They have historic districts. So, you want to go and change part of the property or put in modern windows, you're not allowed to. You have to follow all those rules. And you often need to bring in an engineer to deal with structural issues, decide whether, many of our buildings, we end up taking the back down because that was a later addition and it was built on a porch or a patio and it has no foundation. So you also, when you use grants, you get into all the grant requirements, which requires bidding. Like they get a contractor out that day. It takes us weeks and weeks to get a contractor with the right specs. We have to put it out to bid. And you need to understand that there are market forces involved. So, an easy property or an area of strong values, the private sector will do it and they really should do it. You're dealing with the properties that nobody wants and they don't want it for reasons that are market related, in that the cost of the rehab exceeds the value, or that, it's very complicated to acquire. You can't find the owner. We only work in one area that rehabs units just to provide affordable housing. It's a wealthy community and they do a tremendous write down to make that work, but that's the only community that everywhere else, the market forces don't work at all. So we'll get to the pictures. This is a property that had been empty for more than 10 years. There was a small fire in the back of the house. We ended up taking it down to the studs and rebuilding it. It was in a historic district. So we had to do historic windows when we put it back in. We had to do pointing bricks. But now it is a lovely single family home. This is another one. A developer, investor bought it thinking he could quickly flip it. And when he opened it up, he went, oh my God. And there it sat. So we bought it. That first picture is the way we bought it. It had been stripped. But he no longer had the money to finish it. And he just wanted to get away from it. And so it just sat and sat because the cost of the remaining rehab exceeded the value. And now it's another single family home. This is a more typical story, 417 Chestnut Street. We tried for years and years to buy this property. It was owned by an out-of-state bank. It actually was foreclosed in 1998. And we tried and tried, and it was rented for a short time after the foreclosure. But the bank wouldn't answer a single letter. They never wanted to admit they owned it. And so it had been condemned, but they always paid the taxes, they always mowed the lawn. So there was very few opportunities for us to get it. When it finally went up for sale, we did a partnership with Habitat of Humanity of Montgomery and Delaware County and a Mosaic Community Land Trust. And I'm sorry about that. Just hit the wrong thing. By the time we acquired it, we thought we could just rehab it, but the roof had been open for all these years and the second floor had fallen into the first floor. So the engineer came back. So now it is a vacant lot. And actually earlier this week, they started work on the foundation. So this by next summer will be a house that is a combination of a Habitat property. We provided funding. The state provided funding. There's lots of layers of funding, and the Community Land Trust is going to own the land, and the owner will have the building, and it'll be a land trust property. So this is Little's Bar, another example of what you can get involved with. The owner of the property was an heir, and if she was convinced that she should get enough money to be able to go to Disneyland. So she needed a trip at Disneyland to be able to sell it. We had an appraiser said it had a negative value. It had $100,000+ of IRS liens on it, state liquor liens, because once she inherited it, she didn't feel she had to pay taxes, because I don't know why, but she didn't. By the time we got it, the second floor had a tree growing out of it, so it could only be demolished. And now it is 4 houses. But that project, we had to use the redevelopment authority to clear up those liens, and it took probably 5 years to get control. And this is a more straightforward one. It was a building that had been empty for 20 years in Norristown. It had been like an office building. Before that, it was a tennis club. And the owners really couldn't sell it. I mean, it just deteriorated. And so they donated to us as a nonprofit, and we combined with a developer who built these townhomes that were recently done. 10 of the units are considered affordable. The rest are sort of market, which is on the low end of affordable in our community. On the low end of market rate, rather. So Beach Street Factory was empty for many years. We had a lot of community pushback about renovating it, including council people who said they'd rather have it fall down or burn up than have low-income people in it. Now they all don't remember that. Now that's a successful project, but it's 43 apartments and 4,000 feet of commercial space for an arts education gallery. But it took a long time to do that, and a lot of partners and a lot of layers of funding. It was a complete gut rehab, as you can see. But now it's beautiful apartments, and most people don't even remember that they were against it. But it took 2 years of community meetings to get the community behind it, and many years of applying for tax credits to be able to get it funded. So for all of this, you need to have a really long-term approach. So back in 2000, we did a community plan for this neighborhood that included what we call the dairy building, which is the building on the one picture. It's an old factory building that when we got involved in 2000 was just used by the owner for, it has an underground well. And so he used to fill people's pools. That's all it was used for, and the rest of the building was empty. So we were trying to acquire it from him, and he got ill, and then he passed away. And then we couldn't find the heirs. Years went by. It's not 2010 plan. It finally went for tax sale. And when it went for tax sale, only the front went for tax sale and the back of the building didn't. So the county took years to figure that out. It's now owned by someone who pays the taxes on it, but he's using it as a scrapyard. Really, we're still going to try our methods for doing that. The one on the other side is a school building where when the owner approached us about wanting to sell, we probably showed too much interest, and the price kept going up till it became not a viable project. But we will be back to that again. This is one we're currently doing, which from the outside doesn't look that bad, but from the inside is terrible. There were no water lines, there's no heat, and we ended up gutting it, and we're in the process of building it back. But that property was on the general market, and we just bought it, and we paid probably a little bit of a premium, which sometimes you have to do because we knew that anyone else would not be able to finish it properly. And lastly, the important part when you're doing these complicated projects is to really look for your partners, whether it's a land bank, the local government, a habitat chapter, other nonprofits, private developers that do tax credit projects. It's really hard to do it on your own, and to look for those partners to gather the community support. And then when you do have a successful project, to really celebrate that in the units, and put together that list of successes, whether they be small individual houses or larger ones like the Willows at East Greenville. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Thanks for getting us started. I don't know if I actually mentioned, but we have 5 panelists. And so, Judy, great job at kicking us off on the big picture of what it takes and what it is not. And Hallie Chatfield is our next speaker, and she is Revitalization Coordinator. I love that title. For the Redevelopment Authority of County of Westmoreland and the Westmoreland County Land Bank, which was one of the first land banks created after that 2012 land bank law passed. So Hallie will dig deeper into making these deals happen. You're on mute, Hallie.
Yep, I've got that settled. Now let me do share screen here. Okay, is that working? Hear me. All right. Again, thank you, Irene. My name is Hallie Chatfield, and like Irene had indicated, I'm the Revitalization Coordinator for the Redevelopment Authority of Westmoreland County. I've served in that position for nearly 15 years. And then also for the Land Bank for the last 6. Irene had mentioned we were one of the first land banks in the state. And with that came a lot of new challenges. If we go to, here's what typical blight looks like. These are all projects that we have been involved with over the years, from your small residential to large commercial. We were created in 2013, officially enacted in 2014. Our main mission is the conversion of those vacant, abandoned, tax delinquent, foreclosed properties and get them back into productive reuse and on the active tax rolls. We do that through a number of different methods, whether it's side lot disposition, affordable housing initiatives, commercial redevelopment, community economic development, green space, pocket parks, historic preservation, you name it, we've touched on all of those. Here are some examples of 2 very different areas. The top one is in a dense city type neighborhood. It was the bad seat on the block. And even this picture doesn't even do it justice. On the rear of this picture on the top left, there was canopy type makeshift structures, we'll just say, back there. And really, the day of ownership, we couldn't even enter the home because it had been hoarded from floor to ceiling. So it took a number of weeks to get it cleaned out, to even evaluate it, to what are we going to do with it. The actual lot itself wasn't feasible for side lot disposition. To the right of it is a multi-unit apartment complex, and to the left are residential, but really the rear lots of it. So we charge forward with doing a housing rehabilitation on it. And you'll learn more of the funds that we did use in these instances and what we have used over the years. The bottom photo shows a completely different rural atmosphere. This actually was one of the very first properties, probably the second one that we sold after numerous conversations back and forth with the State Historic Preservation Office. This is located in a very small coal patch town that they deemed this of historic significance. So many months of getting through surveys and what have yous, we finally got clearance to demolish the structure. And then the picture on the right, you can see that it not only did it end up as a single end user for the adjacent owner, but it really transformed the entire neighborhood itself. I touched a little bit on sources of funds. Our land bank, I guess, being one of the more active in the state, we have 122 parcels that we have purchased. 103 of those have been sold back out. Acquiring those costs nearly $410,000. Not a whole lot if you look at the quantity, but selling those back out grossed nearly $2 million and netted almost $180,000 in recaptured property taxes. So you can see the land bank's share of that is half, roughly $92,000. We started with very little startup monies. Our participating member municipalities, which right now we're at 24, did a one-time $5,000 contribution to us. And we have not needed to seek additional funds. Of course, we're taking in additional members, and hopefully at some point we'll have all 65 municipalities within the county involved. But you can see that with affordable housing, we have successfully rehabbed approximately 10 structures utilizing funds from PHFA, which is Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, FAIR funds, Act 137 funds, FAIR RTT funds, and then the recirculating net proceeds. That has enabled us to continue and sustain that project or program. Actually, we'll be getting involved in another 1 to 2, hopefully this year. We have another application in for FAIR RTT. So it's just a matter of marrying all those sources together. On the right-hand side, you'll see more of the community economic development side. We've influxed nearly 1.3 million into programs for site stabilization, demolition, blight removal, community gardens. It's not only the raising of the structure, but then the reuse of it. So those are things that grants that we have received through the land bank and or on behalf of the communities for those reuse projects. So here's just some other examples of our affordable housing. You'll see on the left-hand side was again, it's typical. You've got one bad seed on a block, but really by the time we're done, it becomes contagious and you see that others are improving their structures as well. Even when we're in active rehabilitation and or, on the active tax rolls. Our program is geared to single family users, and it is income based for qualified, the reuse has to be a qualified persons, whether it's single, we've had single parents to entire families, and it's just a really, really great program that we have. Just another couple examples of affordable housing. The top one was an interesting project. I like to say that it's waterfront property, so it's a hot commodity, albeit it's a creek, but it's still waterfront. And so we were fortunate enough that a family that had been, the father had been a lifelong resident, lifelong landlord of not so great houses in town. So the children did not want the responsibilities of the upkeep of these technically, very blighted buildings. So they approached the city. Then the city reached out to us to see if we would be involved, interested in wanting to be involved in this larger, small scale residential redevelopment project. So after months of negotiations, even though it was a donation, there was a lot of behind the scenes activities that had to happen with the estate and the um, policies and procedures of the land bank and what have yous. But all in all, we were able to demolish the 7 properties back in 2018, 2019. We partnered with a certified housing developer for low to moderate income families. That entity is called Homes Build Hope. They have demolition, like I said, has been completed. Their Homes Build Hope has done architectural and engineering studies and site plans and has everything in order. However, our funds are not yet secured. They have applied twice now to PHFA's low income housing tax credit program and have not been successful quite yet. They are looking at perhaps doing a phased approach to in order to perhaps get 2 to 3 homes at a time done utilizing their own funds. The project on the bottom of the slide is something that was unique within the city of Greensburg, a property that one tax parcel had 2 residential units on it, making it challenging for reuse. The rear home was actually in better shape than the side street, street front property, making it, well, what do we do? Like if we demolish the front, then it's a setback issue. If we demolish the back, then we've got a lot of money to influx into the front. So we did partner up with our Central Westmoreland Habitat for Humanity, and they, through countless volunteer hours, days, years, have finally finished the 2 units. They were sold out, I believe, at the summer of last year. And now there are 2 families that live in these homes. We've subdivided the properties, so there's no longer that tax parcel issue. So it leads me to commercial development. The properties that are highlighted here, the Microbrewery Project, began as a stabilization and seeking private developer to transform this this department store back into something. After a few months to a year of finding someone, Sobel's Obscure Brewery, which is a local distillery, wanted to expand out of their warehouse space. So the property was sold to them in May of, I want to say it wasn't May, it was it might be now about a year ago. Sometimes things just run in, and with COVID-19, like time just gets away from you. But what we were able to do with Sobel is they are doing a full build out of the interior for commercial use of a restaurant and microbrewery. The property directly adjacent to it was recently raised in spring of last year, that now enables their footprint to expand and include an outdoor venue area. Across the way was a catastrophic fire that then the community has invested a number of a large amount of funds to develop a amphitheater center. And so this This is kind of a catalyst project. There's a lot going on in Jeanette, a lot of reinvigoration of that community. So we're excited about that one. The Irwin apartment complex, a little bit more challenging. This was one of our first ones we purchased out of the annual tax sale, which is different than how we typically acquire at the judicial level. And nevertheless, it had only a municipal lien and then the tax delinquencies on it. And so we felt it was the time for us to purchase was at the annual level. The owners didn't quite see it that way. They challenged us, challenged the purchase of that property through months of court hearings and what have yous. Their main conflict was that the sale notification was improper. Well, after, evidence, the judge ruled in our favor. So we were able to uphold the sale and seek out a commercial developer. So it was a large scale project. The upper floors have been redeveloped into 6 apartments. The lower level has a very active taco bar and tequila bar. So it's a little bit unique. Across the way is the community theater that's been revitalized and renovated. And there's just a lot happening in this little small community. This one is one that we're currently working on. It's called the Morning Sun Senior Apartments. It is located in a borough of probably 1,300 residents. So it's very, very important to them to see something happen with this large structure in the center. So it was a former elementary school. It was built in 1939. It has sat stagnant since 2006. So what is that? Nearly 25 years. Various tax delinquency, liens exceeding $16,000. The current owner actually lives across the street. They had great intentions of doing like an artist type loft type residential, what have you. The building's condition was far beyond their capabilities. So we approached them to do some due diligence work. So we have done our phase 1 environmental site assessment, which includes asbestos and lead testing. We have evaluated the roof. We are currently going to be seeking bids to make that this property weather tight as we sit and wait for MVAH, which is Miller Valentine Affordable Housing, who was interested in creating 41 to 2-bedroom units on site with support systems. So doctors and accountants and things like that will be available for the residents. It will be geared for 62 and older. And like I said, the right now, MVAH and the other partner in this, the Homes Built Hope that I had mentioned earlier in the presentation, will partner up on this and go in for low income tax credits. The total project is estimated at $12.8 million. So we're really hopeful that this one will get underway here within the next year to 18 months, and we can do something great down in that town. Excuse me. So I touched base a little bit on the deals that I guess have a lot of monies and backings to it, but you also have to do your feel good places. So these are just 2 examples of taking down multiple structures to create what was a first in the county area for an urban garden. It is manned by volunteers. It's called Seeds of Change. And really the volunteers there grow the produce, and then they actually go to the farmers markets that are held locally in town, and they're at below market rate prices. It's more of just a beautification project. We were able to incorporate some green initiatives. The Westmoreland Transit Authority, which is our public commuter system, had a bus stop here, but no shelter. So we worked with them to create a green roof structure and a recapturing system that for water that then is used to feed the garden area. The one below is just an expansion of a small town community park that neighboring was a blighted structure. We tore it down, raised some funds, incorporated a train locomotive that is reminiscent of the historic nature of the town, and just another example of active greening that we do. How much time do I have left? Am I good? I only have a couple more slides, I think. So this project here is something that we're in the midst of now. We're again in our due diligence phase. We've done our phase 1, asbestos and lead. What is unique about this structure is there's no roof left. So we are seeking out developers that have interest in creating mixed use, whether commercial on the first floor and residential's on the upper floor. We have a developer that's hot in town right now that has some other active projects going on that also has shown interest in this particular project. We also have an adjacent owner that is showing some interest as well. The building has sat vacant for 25 years also. It really was at the lowest of the low in tax sale classifications. For years, it was at the judicial tax sale level. The owner at that particular point in time was in the military, so could never really be moved forward because of that protective status that active duty does. Eventually, it was put back on to active tax rolls, moved through those processes, and went to what is called the repository level. And a speculator purchased the property for mere $500, something like that, of this 5-story structure. And again, she had good intent of redeveloping the site, but lack of funds. So it sat again vacant for another 4 to 5 years under her ownership. She has come to us and is interested in donating the property. It's just far beyond her ability to stabilize it. It's become a public health, public safety issue. The building facade has been tied back with temporary measures. So we are working through having drone videos and things done of the building to try to understand its construction and whether or not it can be salvaged. So we were seeking out funds for historic preservation, the selective demolition, and or building stabilization to pass it on to that private developer. Right now, our projected cost is anywhere from $400,000 to $750,000. That just includes site stabilization and or selective demolition. So we are seeking out those funds at this time, but we're again very excited for this project. Another one that we're working on, this was the DCNR funding source that I had spoken about earlier. This was a block redevelopment, again, acquired through donation. Partial demolition had taken place by the former owners, leaving it in quite a mess for us. After some creative strategies, we were able to demolish the structures. We have now transferred title to Vandergrift Borough, and we have successfully secured funds to do a green initiative, which is going to include a community green space, beautification and stormwater management control, which you can see on the site plan to the left. Another example of how we've become involved for new construction, acquired 2 lots, and new construction went up for a medical marijuana dispensary in town. This is probably one of our largest, and I'm sure folks have heard about it before. This is what is called the former Monsoor Medical Complex. There was numerous judgments and IRS liens and pension benefits and what have you on this property that just the title was dirty. So we worked strategically with the IRS and with pension benefit, with community, and with our tax claim bureau, and with our partners, the Industrial Development Corporation, to finally acquire the site for a mere, I think, $15,000. It ended up costing us, but it's, only took about $3 million to bring it down. So you can see it's in a close proximity to one of our major artery roadways in the county. And like I said, it's been brought down. We have a option agreement, actually has been transferred to Colony Holdings, and they are seeking out users for their new commercial redevelopment plan. I guess that's it. I got through it. There's my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me with any kind of questions. I know it was very through a lot of things, and there's a lot of information that we've been through, and 6 years brings a little bit of experience. So,
Thank you so much, Haley.
thanks.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. So yeah, lots of that. Haley, thank you. And we now move on to Ann Lewis, who is the executive director of 2 entities. One is a COG, the Council of Government, and the other is the Tri-Cog Land Bank. And Ann will tell you all about that. You ready, Ann?
I am. Hello, everybody. I am happy to talk about the Tri-Cog Land Bank and some of the work that we've done, and some of the partnerships that we've developed. Just a little way of introduction. The Tri-Cog Land Bank is a land bank working in Allegheny County, outside of the city of Pittsburgh. Our county is right next door to Westmoreland County that Hallie was just talking about. Our land bank formed several years after the Westmoreland County Land Bank. Hats off to Irene McLaughlin-Clark, who helped us enormously in the formation of this multi-jurisdictional land bank. We work, and our members are 22 municipalities in Allegheny County, their school districts, and the county. And unlike other places, Westmoreland County, for example, our land bank is not integrally intertwined with the redevelopment authority. So we are a separate independent agency. And in Allegheny County, like many other places, there's not a good mechanism to gain control of abandoned properties and put them back into productive use. So just sort of taking a step back, that's really the beauty and the magic of what a land bank does and can do, is that the land bank is that responsible party that is there when a tax sale is initiated. One of the challenges with tax sales is that it's a good mechanism potentially for collecting delinquent taxes, but there are no controls to make sure, first of all, that you'll have a buyer at the end of the day. So there could be an enormous amount of cost to bring a property to sale. But then secondly, if there is a buyer, there's no system to vet and make sure that buyer is a good buyer. So land banks really are an important tool in the blight fight because they are that responsible buyer. Oftentimes properties are thought about, there's a strategy put in place before the properties are chosen. Sometimes there's an end user, sometimes not. But our land bank has very strong relationships with our members. We work directly with the municipalities to find the best use of each property that we take on that's consistent with their community, their comprehensive plan, their community goals, etc. And land banks can be very nimble and can be a part of that pipeline to really think through the potential reuses of properties. The other thing that's really important to talk about with land banks like ours that are sort of separate from government is that we can be very nimble. We can create organizational policies with our memberships to do more creative things. There are many of the laws that apply to governments that also apply to land banks, but we can be more flexible in the disposition plans that we cultivate for these properties. And so the examples that I want to talk about today of some of the things that we've done builds on that idea of working with partner organizations. I don't want to take my colleague Ed Nusser's thunder and talk too much about a community land trust and what it does, but I want to, one of the really cool things that we've done lately is worked with City of Bridges and also working on lead safer demolitions. So just also to talk about and build on what my colleagues have said, when land banks acquire properties, they're not usually in great shape. And we are legally required to stabilize them, hold them, maintain them. We are prohibited by law to violate local code. So when Tri-Cog Land Bank, this is one example, acquires a property, we immediately go out. The open window was boarded up. The overgrown grass was, immediately, and garbage was immediately removed from the outside of the home. So stabilization, even if it takes a while to cultivate a plan, is really important because as the many cost of blight studies that have been done have shown is that that act of just stabilizing a property and cutting the grass can really start that process of community improvement. Here is another example. This is one of our first houses, and it looked pretty good on the outside. We are not able to get into our properties until we acquire them. So when we walked into this house, we found the mess on the left-hand side, which we worked with a local nonprofit. On many of our cleanups, we work with a local nonprofit that provides employment and training for individuals with barriers to employment. A lot of them have criminal background records and have a hard time getting into the job market, and they do an absolute fantastic job. The other thing that I really wanted to talk about that's important to mention that land banks can play a role in is the acquiring or purchasing or making possible title insurance for a new buyer. So title insurance is not something that we typically talk about a whole lot, but it's critically important. It's insurance that you purchase at the time of the purchase that basically protects you from being sued if something was missed in the title clearing process, which can happen. So a lot of these properties that have been standing and are abandoned, there are a lot of clouds, if you will. There are a lot of bad things that have occurred, irresponsible activities that have occurred, and the legal process isn't always perfect. So title insurance is an insurance policy you buy just in case something bad happens. Sadly, in order to acquire title insurance, you have to have a title insurance company willing to issue a policy to you. And so these private insurance companies are not always enthusiastic about insuring properties that have gone through tax sale, sheriff sale, tax claim bureau sale, whatever it's called in your county. So we've worked very, very hard to identify and find title companies and to have a robust legal process in our process that allows for us to offer title insurance policies to our end buyers. One of the things that is not unique to Allegheny County, pivoting to the public health, is we have a very high rate in many of our distressed communities of elevated blood levels of lead in our children. It's disproportionate among poor children, and it's disproportionate among Black and brown children. And so the Tri-Cog Land Bank has been a part of a growing conversation in Allegheny County about lead safer techniques. One of those is demolition. The challenge between lead safer demolitions is they're more expensive. Typically, distressed communities, municipalities can't afford to demolish. Their tax base is eroded, and just because a house is in bad shape, there may not be the funds to bring it down. So there's a really important balance between keeping a cost control on demolition and keeping the population safe. Is it safer to leave more buildings standing? So we're in the middle of that conversation, both the land bank and the COG. And because the land bank owns these properties, we can cultivate some pilot projects. This is an example of one of them that occurred in Millvale, where we did a wet demolition. You can sort of see from the photograph on the left, these properties are very close to one another. And so there was plastic that was placed. There were notifications that were issued. And here is another set of photographs that kind of show our process. We had testing, air quality testing that was performed. Water was applied. Prior to the demolition, the contractor cut a hole in the roof to wet down the building before it came down. There was some pre-demolition work to remove certain items prior to the demolition. So we feel that it's exciting that the Tri-Cog Land Bank can be a part of a regional initiative to really think about demolition practices and to help our health department and our municipalities cultivate good policies that accomplish and balance both keeping children safe, keeping the community safe, and getting these buildings down with limited resources. We think this is a really important work to be doing right now because Allegheny County just enacted Act 152, which is a piece of legislation that allows for counties to establish a fund specifically for demolition. So these activities are going to increase. Tri-Cog Land Bank is one organization. We have limited capacity. For that purpose, it's really critical to our success and to be able to do these creative things that we develop good, long-standing partnerships with organizations. What I want to say about community land trusts and City of Bridges Community Land Trust is they build permanent affordable housing in their communities. And the Tri-Cog Land Bank and City of Bridges Land Trust, we have overlapping geography in 3 municipalities that are gentrifying. The housing prices are skyrocketing, and people are being priced out of the market. So having permanent affordable housing is a priority for these communities. We worked with national partners. The Center for Community Progress is the national organization focused on land banks, and Grounded Solution Network is the national organization focused on land trust. We developed a memorandum of understanding to build on this partnership, a legal agreement, and we identified 3 pilots. So these are 3 houses that we are just getting started with. They're still owned by Tri-Cog Land Bank, but we are working with Ed and his staff to develop. Ed is working on renovation plans. He's had architects go through these houses. All 3 of these houses would be completely renovated. And what's great and exciting is that these are, this is housing stock that belongs in these communities. These are not newly constructed homes that don't fit in. Ed will talk about how they work and their standards, but what's also really cool, 320 Linden in Sharpsburg is one of the first houses that was built in that community. You can still see the natural timbers. So it's a way of moving forward with these goals, but also continuing to preserve the existing housing stock. So I will end my presentation. I thank everybody for their time. And I will turn it back to Irene.
Thanks so much, Anne. All right, and Ed Nusser is our next speaker, and there's another speaker beyond that. And we may be a little short on Q&A, but that's okay. We'll figure that out. So Ed, you have already been introduced by Anne, and I will just add that you are the executive director of the City of Bridges Community Land Trust. And I just have to say to everybody, please check out their webpage. I found it so refreshing to open up a website and just see affordable, period, permanently, period. It's great. There you go, Ed.
All right. Thanks, Irene, and thanks, Anne, and hi, everyone. Great to be with you. I'm going to get my screen share set up here. Here we go. And play. There we go. So can everyone see just my slides? Is everyone good to go?
We see 2 slides.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just so you know, Ed, your time target is about 11:10.
Okay.
All right.
All right, let's try it this way. Sorry about the technical difficulties here.
They happen. They happen all the time. And you know, we have been having some questions come through. Oh, it looks like you're there.
There we go.
Just
Yeah.
about, Ed. All right.
Now are we good with just one slide?
Yes.
All right. So sorry, I'm embarrassing my millennial colleagues by being bad at technology. But I'm Ed Nusser. I'm the executive director of City of Bridges Community Land Trust. We're located in Pittsburgh. We serve the city of Pittsburgh as well as a few first ring suburban communities, which is where my organization and Anne's, the Tri-Cog Land Bank, overlaps. Prior to jumping into just what the heck a land trust is and why we're on a panel talking about blight remediation, just wanted to give a quick background on who we are at City of Bridges. So we're a 2-year-old organization. We're a nonprofit community land trust, and we exist to build community ownership that preserves permanent affordability. Thank you, Irene, for calling that out. Empowers individuals and ensures responsible growth and stewardship. We have 16 affordable homes in our portfolio. And this year is shaping up to be a busy year with plans to break ground on hopefully 25 homes in the next 12 months across 6 different communities. So Anne set this up really nicely, but just wanted to introduce the idea of a community land trust, because I'm sure a lot of folks in this world of blight remediation have heard the idea of land banks a lot, but this idea of land trust might be a bit foreign. So just what are CLTs? So first of all, CLTs are 50 years old. The first land trust in the country was an organization called New Communities Incorporated. It was based in Albany, Georgia, and it grew out of the civil rights movement in the Jim Crow South. It was organized by Black tenant farmers who couldn't access lending or property ownership, but had been farming the land for generations. So they came together to look at this idea of what can we do together that we can't do separately. And so from that history, CLTs have grown. We're a flexible tool. CLTs across the country do a lot of work, but the heart of our work is in creating permanently affordable housing. Simply put, if it isn't affordable, it isn't a CLT. So how do we do this idea of permanent affordability? Well, we changed the model of property ownership. Land trusts are place-based nonprofit organizations. We permanently own land on behalf of the communities we serve, and we sell homes that are on that land to income qualified homeowners. We enter into a 99-year fully inheritable ground lease that automatically renews for a second century. But the deed to the land, the deed to the home, the ground lease are all recorded at the county real estate office. And the ground lease does 2 things. First of all, it gives our homeowners legal, durable, enforceable right to be on land that the community owns. And secondly, it also sets a resale value on the home they're owning. That's agreed upon up front and sets a ceiling on the value of the home for any point in the future. And the idea behind this is that communities create wealth. Communities, not simply homeowners, can create wealth. But in our current system, that wealth is privatized. And I use the example of, you can pick any gentrifying neighborhood, but no individual homeowner is responsible for 200 street trees being planted or crime rates decreasing or local business districts thriving. Those are done by communities. And so what CLTs seek to do is balance community created wealth and the access to that for people across the economic spectrum. I said that we're 2 years old. CLTs exist in 47 states. There are others across the Commonwealth. Mosaic CLT was talked about earlier today as well. And across the country, there are about 13,000 homes that are in community land trust stewardship. Now, the heart of the matter, I wanted to talk about how land trusts and land banks can have this complementary relationship. And also really quickly, I just encapsulated a really complex idea of communal property ownership in 2.5 minutes. So I'm sure there are follow-up questions and hopefully we have time for that. But I wanted to thank our friends at Center for Community Progress that produced these next 2 slides for us to talk about some of the differences and similarities and sort of reciprocal relationships that can exist between land banks and land trusts. One of the key differences is that land banks are enabled by state legislation. And so land banks have state requirements that Anne and others have spoken of. Land trusts are private nonprofits. We don't need to be enabled by the state to exist. Similarly, because of that, we don't have any special powers of acquisition. Land banks do. And also, I think key among that, land trusts, as I said, permanently own land. Land banks are not in the business of permanently owning land. They are a temporary owner. They're a pass-through to clear legal issues, to clear title, and hand a property off for productive reuse. And that's one of the areas that land trust can come in. One of the leading thinkers in the CLT movement is a gentleman named John Davis, and John has a quick quote that I like to rely on a lot. He says, land banks often have a disposition problem, and land trusts have a continual acquisition problem. So it only makes sense for these two organizations that can really have matching challenges and hopefully solutions to work together. Another slide from our friends at CCP, who distilled, again, pretty complex ideas down to a couple of bullet points. But land banks can often be challenged with finding a community-oriented, community-supported end user for these blighted problem properties that we saw earlier, right? The time and energy it takes to figure out how to proactively and successfully redevelop these properties is a unique skill set. You're not going to have a lot of people who are able to take these on. And so that Venn diagram overlap of successful qualified developer with community support can sometimes be a pretty small sliver. CLTs can act in that space. Community land trusts are membership-based organizations. We're rooted in the communities that we serve. And so we can provide that responsible end user that's grounded in the community as an answer to some of the land bank's challenges. Similarly, for folks for others who are working in the affordable housing space, we all know that financing our gaps is a perpetual challenge. There's not enough money from public and private sources to finance all of the deals that our communities need. So we need to get creative about how we can bring sort of internal subsidy to bear on our projects, and working with land banks to acquire vacant properties that are good renovation candidates can be a cost-effective way for us to acquire properties to be developed. So why do this? Why a CLT? Why separate property ownership? Well, a couple quick motivations. First, I mentioned our membership organization. As executive director, 2/3 of my board, 2/3 of my bosses are people that are drawn directly from the areas and the people that we as an organization serve. 1/3 of our board is reserved for folks who live in CLT properties, and our 1/3 of the board is elected by community members and our community representatives of the neighborhoods that we serve. Moving on, there's sort of the market motivation, right? The missing middle of housing. The market will provide luxury housing. That's fine. This is a screenshot of the city of Pittsburgh from realtor.com. Every house listed for sale, May of last year. Lots of options, right? This is what's available if you kind of put in the parameters of what a typical 60 to 80% AMI family could reasonably expect to afford. Everything on the market, what's actually affordable and available for families at 60 to 80% of area median income. The market isn't filling this gap, and they're never going to, because there's no profit motive to deliver a house at this price point. And then lastly, I can't end without talking about CLT homeowner security. As I said, been on for 50 years, a long track record to show what happens. 90% of CLT homeowners stay in their home for at least 5 years. Historically and across the country, CLT owners stay in their homes for about 7 years, which is actually longer than the average tenure of market rate home ownership. So it actually can contribute to longer community stability, longer individual stability as well. And then lastly, and most importantly, for an organization that's not just about creating affordable housing, but that's about housing and economic justice, how do we create a system that overcomes the barriers that have been put in place over the last century that precludes entire people groups from accessing lending and property ownership? Almost 3/4 of CLT homeowners, when they sell their CLT home, go on to buy an unrestricted market rate home. This is the first rung of the ladder of property ownership. And our first project was 7 houses. Over the course of a 99-year ground lease, if these national averages hold, we'll serve 14 families in every house we've built. Again, if national averages hold, 10 of those 14 homeowners will go on to buy an unrestricted market rate home. So by building 7 CLT homes 4 years ago, we've opened the door for 70 families to access market rate home ownership. And that was, I think, as fast as I can get through all of that. So I'm gonna hop off. Thank you all so much. There are probably a lot of questions to come.
Thanks so much, Ed. And I am getting questions in. They are coming. And we are going to get to them after our last speaker, who is Helen Mernicki. And she is the administrator of the Schuylkill County Land Bank. She is our closer. You ready, Helen? You're on mute. You're on mute. Yeah, and we are a little bit over time, and we're going to see if we can get like an extra 5 minutes for Q&A.
Yeah,
I think we hear you, Helen.
okay, great. Sorry about that. Hitting a lot of buttons here.
Yeah.
Take on this is a little different than the other presenters.
Helen, are you going to share your presentation?
Is it sharing with you?
Not yet, correct? No. Yeah, so we may get another 5 minutes or so beyond, if that's okay with everybody.
Okay, let me see. Do you see the share now?
No. No.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm like everyone else. I'm like, okay.
You do what you got to do. Yeah, we are going to ask for another 5 minutes, I think, at the end, but we're fine. The questions are very manageable.
Now it worked before.
Yeah.
Helen, did you click on the blue or the green screen share button?
Let's see here. Everybody here. Let's see.
There is one question from the audience that says that they have lots of questions, and I hope they'll, that she can access the speakers directly. I think you're all open to that.
Are you seeing it yet?
Yes, it's not quite just one slide per screen.
I have the same problem as the last presenter. But I'll try to maneuver around. That's okay. I don't know what happened. It was correct before. But my presentation basically is called Connecting the Dots. And my story is a little different than the rest. I did not have a government background, a political background, just holding a Pennsylvania Association of Realtors broker's license for 33 years. What happened about 4 years ago, I decided to run for Frackville Borough Council. I got elected and I heard about, boy, Frackville Borough is part of a land bank and we did not have any representation. So I went to some meetings and I got started. I got intrigued. After that, I decided, well, let's see what they're all about. I found out, as you could see, is that, Schuylkill County really has a lot of blight. Found out that they were formed in December 2015. So we're still young and we do service 7 municipal entities, which is basically Northern Schuylkill County. One thing I found out is that blighted properties do not stop at a zip code. We're the old coal mining era. When coal was king, we were great. We were thriving. But right now, we do suffer with blighted properties. And we all need to get involved because, like I said, it grows. Some people, I hate to say, don't you feel that they just suck a property dry and then let it go to the county, let it go back to the municipal, let them deal with it. But we do need to keep a positive flow going. The thing is, where do we start? And I know it could be overwhelming. Just seeing the last presenters, it's like I have to go, wow, that's a lot of information. And how do you grasp it all? The key is you have to find the right property. Not every property has a good end use. So you have to find the property that what would serve or community or county the right way. You could rehab them. It could be a demolition again, but what the end use has to be a positive reflection. You have to attain financing. There are sources of the private, local, state, and federal, and they're all tedious. Matter of fact, I'm just working on one now that got started in 2019. Isn't that hard to believe? But we're almost at the end goal that we'll see some funding. You have to get your community behind the land bank because there's so much planning. One person cannot do it all, and you have to stay focused on that end goal. And like you said, there's always the people complaining, the negative, but you have to stay positive because when it's all done, everybody is positive. Everybody forgets about the negativity. But once you receive your funding, let me tell you, that's when the fun begins. Because what? These grants have rules. And as some of the other presenters said, like these rules are pretty detailed and you have to follow these rules for a reason. After you get to that point, your property is ready for a buyer. And that's where I first jumped in. As a realtor, I was the realtor involved in selling properties. So I did not see the blighted interior. I wasn't there for the drama. I was just part of the good stuff, the fluff, the ribbon cutting, giving the keys to a buyer. This first property here in Ashland, I drove by many times. It was blighted. And what the story was, you had the two homes that basically were damaged from a fire. There were properties next door and in the rear also, they were fire damaged, they were blight. Oh, it was just horrible. The key is community cooperation with the borough. They helped us achieve obtaining these properties through the judicial sales and being able to clear up some issues on them. And as you could see, the finished product is magnificent, but it's a step. That one started in 2017 and the buyer didn't move in until 2019. And there was funds through fair funding, County Act 137, Keystone Community DCED. And what we had to do is tear down Blight, give yard space, was side yard and rear yard to that property. And it worked. And guess what the best news is? The homeowner is taking care of it. It's back on the tax dollars. Every time you go by and it's a busy street there, you could see it's decorated for the holidays. You could see it's well maintained. It makes the community look so much better. On this story, let me tell you, that buyer got out of college and he was probably going to leave our area as a professional person. He decided to stay and have his career here with the home. So that was a plus for everybody involved. This property here in Delano, again, when I got involved, it was all done. If you see that side lot, guess what? That was supposed to be the subject property that was going to get rehabbed. After the land bank acquired it, they found out it was structurally unsecured to do that. So the property that was going to originally be torn down was the salvage property. And they did a great job. And as you could see, again, a wonderful project there. The buyer was a parent with children. It provided a house for her. And again, you know, we used some of the same funding. What the nice part is, this homeowner put on a massive deck, again, got permits. It's back on the tax roll. It creates, it's not a property anymore. It's a home and it's making the community look better. When we had the ribbon cutting and all the excitement on this property, it was fun. Here, the neighbors were painting their own homes. So like the other said, everyone else kind of kicks in. When you see a happy story, they fix up their homes. Because guess what? I don't want to be the ugly house on the block now. It's not them. I'm going to fix up my property. And that's what we see. We also do a thing called the side lot program. And on the first photo, you're going to see where taxes weren't being paid. It was a foreclosure. This one's a little bit of a different story. We were able to get contact with Wells Fargo because it was on their foreclosed list. They donated it to the land bank. with a bonus of 80% of the demo money. Isn't that wonderful? So we got some demo money from there and the rest from the county. And as you could see, the property was torn down. It was attached to another home, what we call semi-attached, half double. There's different language terms in different communities, but we were obligated just to side the one house. Guess what? They painted the rest of the house to match the siding at their own dollar. The neighbor that acquired the lot fixed their home up because guess what? When you're not near Blight, you feel positive. And as today, it's used to off-street parking. And I always say you have the beginning of the dots, the end dot. You again, tax roll, and it benefits the community. Some of the fun thing is the challenges faced is finding a buyer that would qualify for the mortgage. Again, there was a little bit of talk here, with the type of income you could have. So you have to be a buyer in the mortgage world that has income coming in, and with the debt ratio, what they call the mortgage amount, what's left. So most of the time you have to have a buyer that does not have any or very little credit card debt, maybe a car loan, but not a high end, so they can afford this mortgage. And keep in mind, these properties are being sold even at less than the rehab cost. So example, if you have something, that's being, 130,000 in my market area to rehab, and you're only going to get on a good day, 70,000. If you're lucky, it's a little challenging to follow the rules, but you have to. And that's why the investors don't buy them, rehab them, because there is no profit to be made. But the bigger side of the story is it provides housing that this buyer never would ever have the opportunity to obtain. We have our rules, the owner occupant buyer. And let me tell you, as a realtor, boy, do people try to cheat. Yeah, I mean, you get every story, but we do our due diligence to make sure that they are the owner occupant buyer. Again, the income limits. And we do kind of put all the parcels together that they cannot be sold off for profit. So if you have a buyer and they're purchasing a property with multiple parcels to make the side and rear yard, that is now one entity. We do our background checks. And again, we can't do the investor. And again, just like someone said, you have to watch about title insurance because a lot of these fundings through the FHA program, which we love to sell and utilize, they don't like the quick claim deeds for the title insurance. So you have to find the right title company to issue the insurance that are the quick claim deed, because that's the type of ownership you're taking when you get these properties from the judicial sales. As the new land bank administrator, and again, I just started this July of 2020, there were challenges. So I came into this role with COVID-19 restrictions, courthouse delays closed, no personal meetings. We were using some free conference calls, but guess what? We're rural. We're in an area where we have limited bandwidth. We have internet issues. So we have that is going on, and we're learning, as you can see, my technical problem with the Zoom. We right now got some more properties through the judicial sale. It was slow, and we're going to have some more what we call the side lot properties, and we did transfer those over to the adjoining neighbors within a timely fashion. Because guess what? We don't want to hold these properties. We want to be able to move them to get torn down or rehabbed. We do own one property, and we bought this with the best plans to obtain enough funding for the rehab. We were fortunate to get funding, but not enough for the whole total rehab package. And that happens in today's world. The good news is I was able to do my first grant, and I got awarded funds to finish the project. So this project should be done in 2021. And sometimes you have to find multiple sources of funding to get to the end goal. This property is going to offer a home just like the other presenters. We have communities that are sold out of properties. There's nothing for sale for any buyer. I mean, it's just a very tight market. The pricing, again, supply and demand going up. So if someone is on a situation that qualify for these type of homes, or even if they're just the FHA, VA buyer, they don't have a chance to find a home in these communities. We have so many buyers that offer cash, and someone that needs a mortgage compared to someone paying cash, there's no competition there. Now I'm able to show you, this is what Blight looks like. I'm getting involved at the first dot. This is the one we just acquired at the judicial sale. It's a mess, but we're used to that. So it's that bad that we cannot even safely see what's in the basement or what you call the attic area because there's so much debris there. So once we obtain our funding, we are going to be able to start the clean out to the studs. We will work on our appointing of our project manager, and it will be a learning experience. And anyone watching this, please join along, because if you say, hey, I'm going to learn this, start with me, join me, because I'm learning it too. As I said, I feel like I'm starting backwards. And we will be a busy year for our Schuylkill County Land Bank. We're a little different than the others because most of our municipalities have under 4,000 residents. So we're a group of smaller, we have one township and rest our boroughs together, trying to make a difference. And as you can see, we're growing confidence in our county. And we have a lot of blights, so we'll never run out of blighted properties. As the new administrator, I'm finding out that we are making a difference. I see properties now on the tax rolls. I see properties still being maintained. And sometimes you ever feel where you don't get caught up. And the reason you don't get caught up is because guess what? There's always blight there. There's always a job to be done. But we're going to continue to submit for funding. And I know sometimes people say it's a small step, but guess what? It's always a step in the right direction. And we're always, like I said, looking for other funding opportunities. And that's the key. When you get the funding, you could start another goal, another project. And if anyone has any questions, I will answer them as best as I could. But my story is a little bit different than the others. I'm coming from a different aspect, but we're all for the same goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Yes, thank you all to all of our panelists. And we are going to get into our questions from the audience. And the first one is really geared towards Judy, I believe. Judy, there was a question just about, how Genesis Housing completes the development. Do you do that yourself in-house in essence, or does Genesis Housing actually partner with developers to get the rehab done?
Sure. So we are a very small organization, and so we hire contractors, and many times we're able to bring in local and minority contractors that really couldn't do bigger government contracts for our single houses. For the tax credit projects, those are bigger contractors, but we contract out all of that. We hire architects and engineers. We don't do that in-house.
There you go. So a number of questions came up about rentals and, that sort of end phase where a new tenant is coming to what you have just made available to them. And they're asking about, do you connect with, at that point of being able to rent or even sell a house, do you connect with county human services, your county human services, especially with regard to those offices in the county that are working closely with those facing homelessness, as well as do you connect to local VA housing offices, the Veterans Administration? And another, in terms of rentals as well as sale, do any of you deal with the homes contacts when you are getting that property ready for a new owner?
So I can start that. I can start that. We are also a housing counseling agency, so we work with people. For the tax credit project, it's very hard to get someone from homelessness to meet the requirements for the screening. But for our other single family rentals, we do work very closely with our county homeless program to do a housing first option for them. So it depends on the program. Some programs have much stricter rules for allowing tenants in. So it varies a lot. For people looking for home ownership, we offer counseling so they can be successful and they can always come back to us if they're having a problem.
Thanks, Judy. Does Haley or Helen have any thoughts about that? No? Okay, so then there were some questions on CLTs. And Ed is at the ready to answer them in terms of, is there any kind of equity that a CLT homeowner can derive from if they actually want to move into a market rate
Yeah.
kind of housing?
Yeah, and I think this is the downside of virtual conferences. I can't see who asked that question, but that's a great question. And that's the first question that we get, and it's the first question we should get. So that was a great, I'm glad someone put that into the chat. So I'm actually going to share my screen really quickly because I have a resale formula thing that's really easy to walk through, and it's just a lot easier than saying it.
Sure.
But basically, when you're getting equity from a house, you get it from obviously reducing your mortgage and also from appreciation of the property. In this example, we're using a $130,000 purchase price, which is about the average of the houses that we've sold so far. If you put 1% down, or just over 1%, $1,500 is your down payment, which one of our lending partners, if they're in the room, First Commonwealth Bank has an incredible mortgage product that is 99% LTV. So if you're in the Pittsburgh area, check them out. Other partners have 3% down, which are also incredibly great for buyers we work with. But 1% down, that's, immediate equity in your house. Every month you're paying off your mortgage. And our resale formula says that the resale value grows at the lesser of the growth in area median income over the time you've owned your home, or 1.15% annually. And AMI in our region has grown on average about 1.5% each year over the last decade. So anyway, if you're factoring in that flat 1.15% annual appreciation, in 5 years, your resale value goes from 130 to 137.5. You've paid off about $10,000 of your mortgage. So you have about $19,000 in equity after 5 years. In 10 years, you've gone from 130 to 145.5. You've paid off even more of your mortgage. So you're looking at equity of about $40,000 after year 10.
Wow. Well, indeed, you can build equity in a CLT home. And how about, Ed, another question we had was, do you always use pre-existing blighted properties and structures to transform into CLT properties, or do you do, just new construction, new development ever?
Yeah, so we've done both. So we've built 6 new homes from the ground up. And we've renovated 8 others that were existing structures. It's really a mix of, of those 6 properties, 2 of them had to be demolished and rebuilt. It's always a question of what can be rehabbed and what is actually going to be a better project if it's demolished and built from the ground up. And also, new construction has its benefits in a lot of places in Pittsburgh and surrounding counties. You're not going to find an accessible home that exists because our houses were built 90 years ago. And so if you want to do accessibility, it has to be new construction. If you want to get to energy efficiency, if you want to get to 21st century standards of building, a lot of times it has to be new construction there too.
So thanks, Ed. There is another question directed to you, as well as 3 more that came in that I hope my panelists are taking a look at, because we'll get back, we'll circle back to them. And let's see, so to Ed, what about equity in terms of equitable access, providing opportunities to more vulnerable groups who are most in need of homes?
Boy, that's a great question. Man, I could spend an hour talking about how we do that, because that gets to the heart of the work. I think that there are a couple of things that we as an organization have been talking about and we have to be honest about. And it's about how we expand beyond just doing single family home ownership. Because as I said earlier, we're working in a broken system. And there are systemic barriers that have been put in place for the last 3 to 6 centuries depending on when you start to count, that have blocked entire people groups from accessing lending and property ownership. And so if we continue to focus exclusively on single family home ownership, we're not going to be breaking down the barriers that we have to break down. And so part of that is in getting more creative with our fundraising so that we can bring home prices down lower, so that we can serve lower income populations. Part of that is partnering with more organizations that already have done the hard work of getting people ready for walking into a bank and getting a mortgage, because that can take 3 to 5 years. And that's the reality, but it can also take us 3 to 4 years to put a project together. And so we need to be upfront while we're going through pre-development and working on fundraising. We've got to also work with those partners so that we're doing that same sort of people-based development as well.
Well, all right. So we are at 11:35 and our session host, Jennifer, has graciously given us some more time to answer some more questions, but there will be a hard stop at 11:45. Is the panel okay with that? Okay, so we have some questions I think you've all seen, but the audience doesn't see the answers here. So we want to speak out. How does a person obtain a property? And I know certainly, it's a community process that's quite different from just like Judy was saying at the outset, that we, just like finding that right property is really tough. But Anne and Helen, you just mentioned in the chat that Helen mentioned that she does work with her communities to identify properties and then see if you can obtain them. Is that similar to what you might say, Anne?
Sort of, yes. We do, the Tri-Cog Land Bank works with our communities to establish priorities they have for each individual properties, and then we market them. And we accept applications, and the applications that are submitted for each individual property are evaluated based on a number of factors. The most important factor is the property redevelopment plan. The Tri-Cog Land Bank, we do have some projects where before we release the property to a new individual, most of our properties are residential, a new owner to live in. There are some where we work with a community-based organization like EDS, and those properties are renovated. The Tri-Cog Land Bank, most of the properties, we do not do that a whole lot in-house. So many of the properties that we sell need to be rehabbed by the new owner. And so their redevelopment plan, their capacity to carry out that redevelopment plan is, and what they want to do with the property, whether it's an investor or an owner occupant, are all factors that we consider above and beyond price. So if it's a better end use, we may pick someone who has made a lower offer.
Thanks, Anne. Yeah, it's not really so straightforward, of course. Helen, did you want to mention anything, or Haley on that?
I want to mention something. The key is you have to work with your municipals. They know, they're the heart of the community, so they know where they're getting the complaints. They're the ones that know, they're the ones sending their street departments to cut the grass. They're always getting the complaints. Your police department's getting complaints of all the activities. So you try to target a property, one that is very negative in a way to a community, and also work with the tax claim. Is it a property that you could obtain? Sometimes you'll have a blighted property that the taxes are paid up to date. And sometimes, there's a property, we run into this a lot. Someone did not do no estate planning. You have someone that was in a skilled nursing. It's not that it's a bad story, it's just that stuff happens, and there's no one to sign the deed. That's the bottom line. No matter how you legally look at it, there's no one to sign the deed over. and no one's gonna spend the money to do an action to quiet title or any other funding, so it sits till it hits the 3-4 years behind on taxes. So that's why I said you have to work with your tax, claim office to see what's coming up. The problem that we're running into, and I'm sure other areas are, if something's on the judicial sale, sometimes you'll have an investor purchase the property for pennies on the dollar. And, with the judicial sale, just to refresh everybody, that means, the county gets some of their funding fees, but a lot of money is lost to the school and the municipal on taxes. There is it's all wiped away. So you lost a lot. They'll just put it on the internet and resell the property. And maybe the front photo looks good, or they take a tax card photo from 1996, and then someone else buys it sight unseen. The investor flipped it. And then it sits on the tax roll another 3 years until it goes again. So what we've been using our project where for $100, we could reserve that property and no one could bid against the land bank.
Oh, interesting.
Very successful, because what we've been seeing is after years, it's like, boy, this property 3 years later, it's back on the property, on the tax list again. It's just a cycle, endless cycle.
So we have thanks, Helen. We have 4 minutes left, but thank you for that further description of what it takes. Does anyone want to jump in on a question of just what process do you use when selecting consumers for housing? The acquisition of property, the selection of consumers for housing are almost two different worlds.
They really are two different worlds. We do a housing counseling program and we try to increase the number of people that would be eligible for a mortgage, whether it's one of our houses or not. But we had to come to the realization that home buying is not the answer for everyone. Some people need to be renting for a few years, and that should also be safe and decent housing.
Mm-hmm.
So that the equity issue is a huge problem, because it's real, and how do you overcome those barriers?
Yeah.
So we do a selection criteria that is based on them being successful home buyers. I mean, that's what the criteria really goes down to. So they need to be paying their bills and being able to afford the mortgage payment.
All right. Thanks, Judy. We've got one last question in our last 3 minutes, and that is a good one. Who determines what's blight and what's not? And have any of you ever funded a demo and could not get reimbursed? Go for it, Ann, and then why don't we hear from Hallie and then Ann? Is that okay? In our 3 minutes. There is a hard stop at 11:45.
With Blighted, we do a database it's data driven. It's based on tax delinquencies, use, condition, code delinquencies, et cetera, et cetera. So we have that built, but we also work with municipalities on selecting what is their priorities from that list and vice versa. What is blight? There's different levels of blight, and who determines it is essentially staff, which is myself, who with the redevelopment authority, we're implementing the blight removal. So in accordance with federal blight criteria, how we evaluate each and every one, whether they're going to be demolished or rehabbed. As far as funding and not getting reimbursed, I'm not sure exactly what they're saying with that, of if we demolish and we sell it as a side lot.
Why don't we have Ann jump in at that point? Is that okay, Hallie?
Sure.
Thank you so much.
So I think we use the term blight a lot. I think the goal of our land bank is to try and find houses and save them before they need to be demolished, because the cost to build new and adding new architecture to older neighborhoods doesn't always work so well. So for us, we look more for abandonment, and signs of property abandonment is really that you're not paying your taxes, the property is unoccupied. Typically, code enforcement has tried to contact you. So I think that's a better lens. As far as the demolition is concerned, we don't have dedicated funding for demolition like a government might. And we plan for it. Well, sometimes it happens by accident. We take a house, we think it's stable, and we get in it and we realize it's not. So that's really, you know, there are vehicles for demolition funding, but it's something we plan in our budget. And
All right.
other transactions subsidize many of our demolition activities.
All right. Hey, thank you all in the audience for staying with us through this entire presentation with these fabulous panelists. I just want to give a round of applause to each of them. And yes, I think they are all most open to you getting in touch with them for any further questions. So this is it. And again, thank you and enjoy the rest of your conference today.